What happens when a race car technology reaches the street before the world is ready for it? Today, turbochargers are everywhere. They power family hatchbacks, luxury sedans, pickup trucks, and even economy cars. Smooth, efficient, and carefully controlled by modern electronics, they feel completely ordinary. But in the mid-1970s, turbocharging was anything but ordinary. It belonged almost exclusively to the world of motorsport, where engineers pushed engines far beyond the limits of naturally aspirated performance. Most manufacturers considered the technology too expensive, too complicated, and far too unpredictable for everyday drivers. Porsche saw something different. After dominating North American Can-Am racing with the turbocharged 917, the company became convinced that forced induction represented the future of high-performance engineering. Instead of keeping that technology on the racetrack, Porsche decided to bring it directly to the road. It was an extraordinarily risky decision. The company's iconic 911 already challenged drivers with its rear-engine layout, placing much of the car's weight behind the rear axle. Adding a large single turbocharger promised enormous performance, but it also threatened to amplify every characteristic that made the 911 demanding to master. Many engineers would have considered that combination too dangerous for production. Porsche chose to build it anyway. Introduced in 1975, the Porsche 911 Turbo, known internally as the 930, became the world's first mass-produced turbocharged sports car from a major manufacturer. It wasn't simply faster than the standard 911. It fundamentally changed how drivers experienced acceleration. Beneath its dramatically widened rear fenders sat a 3.0-liter flat-six equipped with a single exhaust-driven turbocharger, producing around 260 horsepower for most European specification cars. By modern standards, that number may not seem extraordinary, but during the mid-1970s it placed the 930 among the fastest production automobiles on Earth. Yet raw performance was only part of the story. Personally, I think what made the 930 unforgettable wasn't its speed, it was the way it delivered it. Below roughly 3,500 revolutions per minute, the engine felt surprisingly calm, almost restrained. Then, as boost pressure rapidly built, the entire personality of the car changed in an instant. The surge of power arrived with remarkable force, transforming the 911 from a composed sports car into something that demanded absolute concentration. Drivers quickly learned that smoothness mattered. Abrupt throttle inputs or careless reactions in the middle of a corner could overwhelm both the rear tires and the driver's confidence. The 930 didn't try to flatter inexperienced drivers. It expected them to improve. And that uncompromising character would eventually make it one of the most respected, and most feared, sports cars of its generation. The challenge facing Porsche engineers extended far beyond adding a turbocharger to an existing engine. They weren't trying to build the fastest straight-line machine possible. Their goal was to create a road car capable of surviving everyday use while preserving the engineering philosophy that had already made the 911 one of the world's most distinctive sports cars. Achieving that balance proved far more difficult than many people realize. Turbocharging in the mid-1970s was still relatively new outside professional motorsport. Modern technologies such as variable geometry turbochargers, sophisticated electronic engine management, and highly responsive boost control simply didn't exist. Engineers had to work with the limitations of the era. The large single turbocharger chosen for the 930 delivered exceptional power once fully spooled, but physics imposed an unavoidable delay before boost arrived. That delay, what drivers now call turbo lag, became one of the defining characteristics of the car. At lower engine speeds, the 911 Turbo behaved with surprising civility. It wasn't particularly aggressive, and in normal traffic it could even feel calmer than many people expected. But as the engine climbed through the rev range, the turbocharger suddenly came alive. Boost pressure built rapidly, the flat-six transformed its voice, and a wave of acceleration arrived with an intensity that few production cars of the time could match. Personally, I think that's what separated the 930 from almost every other sports car of its era. It wasn't simply fast, it forced drivers to think several seconds ahead. Every corner required planning. Every overtaking maneuver demanded precise timing. The car rewarded patience rather than aggression. If you entered a bend too quickly and applied the throttle carelessly just as the turbo reached full boost, the combination of sudden power delivery and the rear engine weight distribution could quickly unsettle the chassis. That behavior eventually contributed to the car's intimidating reputation. It wasn't because the 930 was fundamentally unstable. In fact, driven smoothly and with respect, it offered extraordinary levels of grip and remarkable high-speed stability. The problem arose when drivers underestimated how dramatically the engine's character could change once the turbocharger reached full operating speed. Unlike modern performance cars that use sophisticated electronics to correct mistakes almost instantly, the 930 relied almost entirely on the driver's skill. There was no stability control waiting in the background, no torque vectoring, and no advanced traction systems. If the rear tires lost grip, it was the driver alone who had to recover the situation. That demanded concentration, experience, and above all, respect. The chassis itself reflected decades of continuous Porsche development. Four-wheel independent suspension, precise steering, powerful brakes, and exceptional structural rigidity gave the 930 impressive composure for its time. On fast roads, the rear engine layout that many critics questioned actually delivered tremendous traction under acceleration. With so much weight pressing onto the driven rear wheels, the turbo could launch out of corners with astonishing effectiveness once the driver understood how to work with the car rather than against it. Aerodynamics also became an essential part of the project. The dramatic flared rear fenders weren't created simply for visual impact. They accommodated significantly wider tires needed to manage the turbo's increased performance. Even more recognizable was the large rear spoiler, quickly nicknamed the whale tail. Far from being a styling exercise, it improved engine cooling by directing additional airflow toward the rear-mounted flat six while simultaneously reducing rear-end lift at high speeds. As performance continued increasing throughout development, aerodynamic stability became increasingly important. In 1978, Porsche introduced one of the most significant updates in the model's history. Engine displacement grew from 3.0 to 3.3 liters, and, perhaps more importantly, engineers added an air-to-air intercooler. Cooling the compressed intake charge allowed higher boost pressures while improving reliability and overall performance. Power increased to approximately 300 horsepower in most European markets, making the updated 930 one of the quickest production sports cars available anywhere in the world. Externally, the new intercooler required an even larger rear spoiler, creating the instantly recognizable profile that many enthusiasts now associate with the classic 911 turbo. Performance figures became astonishing for the late 1970s and early 1980s. Depending on specification and testing conditions, the 930 could accelerate from 0 to 100 km per hour in around 5 seconds and reach top speeds approaching 260 km per hour. Those numbers placed it firmly among the world's fastest production automobiles, competing with exotic machinery from Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Aston Martin. Yet unlike many Italian supercars of the period, the Porsche offered something equally valuable: durability. Owners regularly drove their 930s across entire countries, used them for commuting, and even took them to racing circuits on weekends. It was brutally fast, but it was also engineered to be used. That combination of performance and reliability became one of Porsche's greatest strengths. Still, the 930 refused to become an easy car. Every drive reminded its owner that this was a machine born from racing technology rather than marketing departments. It demanded smooth steering inputs, measured throttle application, and complete concentration. Drivers who approached it with humility often discovered one of the most rewarding sports cars ever built. Those who underestimated it frequently learned an unforgettable lesson about physics. And it was precisely that uncompromising personality that transformed the Porsche 930 from a high-performance sports car into an automotive legend. As the 1980s progressed, something unexpected happened. The very characteristics that had once made the 930 seem intimidating began to define its legend. While many manufacturers worked to make their sports cars easier to drive through softer suspension, lighter steering, and increasingly forgiving handling, Porsche refused to dilute the character of the turbo. The company believed that a driver's car should still demand skill. That philosophy earned the 930 a reputation unlike almost anything else on the road. It wasn't simply respected for its performance, it was respected because mastering it became an achievement in itself. Personally, I think that's why the 930 has remained so fascinating for nearly 50 years. It never pretended to be perfect. The turbo lag was real. The rear engine balance required experience. The car constantly reminded its driver that speed came with responsibility. Yet those very qualities created an emotional connection that many modern performance cars struggle to replicate. Every fast corner felt earned. Every perfectly timed gear change felt satisfying. Every moment behind the wheel demanded complete attention. By the mid-1980s, the 911 Turbo had become the dream car of an entire generation. Posters of the wide-bodied Porsche decorated bedroom walls around the world, while magazines regularly placed it alongside the fastest Ferraris and Lamborghinis of the era. Unlike many exotic supercars, however, the 930 possessed something uniquely Porsche. It wasn't built solely for wealthy collectors. It was engineered to be driven. Owners regularly covered enormous distances, crossed continents, and used their turbos exactly as Ferry Porsche believed sports cars should be used, on real roads, not hidden away in garages. That combination of everyday usability and extraordinary performance became one of Porsche's defining strengths for decades to come. The influence of the 930 extended far beyond its own production run. Every turbocharged 911 that followed owed something to the car introduced in 1975. Later generations became faster, more refined, and dramatically easier to control thanks to electronic engine management, all-wheel drive, variable geometry turbochargers, and sophisticated stability systems. They accelerated harder, cornered faster, and delivered their performance with remarkable confidence. But in becoming more approachable, they inevitably lost some of the raw unpredictability that had made the original turbo so unforgettable. Looking back today, it's remarkable how many engineering ideas introduced with the 930 eventually became standard throughout the performance car industry. Turbocharging, once viewed as an experimental technology suitable mainly for racing, gradually spread across the automotive world. Today it powers everything from compact hatchbacks to luxury sedans and high-performance supercars. Yet few modern turbocharged engines deliver power with the same dramatic personality as the original 930. Modern engineering has largely eliminated the characteristics that once defined it. In many ways, that's progress. But it also means that no future Porsche is likely to recreate exactly the same experience. The 930 belongs to a unique moment in automotive history, a time when engineers accepted imperfections because they believed the reward was worth it. They didn't build the easiest sports car. They built one of the most memorable. And perhaps that's the greatest achievement of the Porsche 911 Turbo. It didn't become a legend because it frightened people. It became a legend because it rewarded those willing to understand it.